with us forever and ever and ever.
This is something I experienced shortly before moving out of one of my teenage homes a couple of years ago. When I was around 13 or 14 years old, my great-grandmother used to collect dolls. One of the dolls I took a particular liking to because of how goddamn creepy it looked. She picked up on it and actually gave it to me not too long before she passed away. Fast forward to the story at hand. My two stepbrothers and I were sitting in the living room, chatting late at night, around 1 a.m. or so. For context, this is a cookie-cutter house, so when you walk in you basically have to choose between going upstairs or downstairs. The living room is directly upstairs from the front door. There is a fireplace on the left-hand wall, but not much else to note since it was an open concept. Adjacent to the wall, there was the railing overlooking the doorway area, and in front of the railing is the couch. There's also a television sitting on the ground on the wall opposite the couch. During our conversation, we got into the topic of childhood paranormal experiences. Joking around, I went and grabbed the doll from my bedroom and leaned it up on the shelf above the fireplace. I made sure when I put the doll up there that it was leaning securely, so as not to slip off. Some things that are now important. The television is on, but just the no signal screen. And because we were preparing to move, there are boxes and trash bags filled in front of the fireplace, at least 3 to 5 feet out. We were all sitting on the couch at the time this happens. In the middle of the story, my youngest stepbrother was telling about an experience he had in the basement of a childhood home. The doll was flung forward from the shelf, landing a good few feet away from the boxes, meaning it flew a good 6 to 8 feet away from the fireplace. At the exact same time the doll made contact with the ground, the television shut itself off and turned itself back on. We've never had any electrical issues in that house or with that TV. Needless to say, we about pissed ourselves. I know people are going to say it's possible that the doll had just fallen, but the doll flew forward off the shelf, even though it was leaning backwards. And things that fall don't typically fall outwards several feet. Let me know what you all think. So when I was 7 to 9, I don't remember what age I was, I had this doll that was about as tall as a German Shepherd. This doll had a voice box where if you pressed it, the doll would laugh and giggle for about 30 seconds. This voice box was placed in a pocket in the back of the doll's dress. Eventually, I got annoyed with the voice box due to it going off a lot. Before this incident, I had thought that some stuff behind it was pressing it, or that the pocket was sewn on too tightly, so it was pressing the box when there was no pressure on the pocket. So as I said, I got annoyed at the box, so I had emptied out a drawer and placed the box in the drawer. I had closed the drawer carefully so as not to move the box in the slightest. After this, I went to sleep. At maybe midnight, I had woken up to the sound of the box coming from the doll. I had made sure to place the doll on the opposite side of the room from the drawer the box was in. Forgetting for a minute that I had taken the box out of the doll, I tried to get back to sleep. About 5 minutes later, I remembered where I put the box and got up to open the drawer. It was still there, exactly where I had left it. A few weeks later, I got rid of the doll. However, for a few years after that, I could still hear the laughter of the doll's voice box. I only remembered this incident when I had found one of my porcelain dolls on the kitchen counter. My mum had moved it for some reason. This happened about 10 years ago when I was in secondary school. That year, I was in the morning session. Since my school was in Queenstown, I stayed in Jurong. I have to leave the house quite early to catch the 7 a.m. bus. Normally, I would get up at 6 a.m. to get ready for school. The night before the incident, my sister and I had difficulty sleeping. We share the same bedroom. It was a very warm night, so since my father was working the night shift, we went to sleep in my mother's air-conditioned room. I still could not sleep, so at 5:30 a.m., I decided to take a bath and get ready for school. I took my bath in my mother's bathroom and then went up to my room to get ready. I was combing my hair when I heard somebody calling me, "Kakao, kakao," sister in Malay. I turned around thinking my sister had woken up, but there was no one around. I went to my mother's room and found my sister still asleep. I grew scared but brushed it off as my imagination. I went to the room again to get my school bag and, again, heard it. This time I heard a small child's voice calling me, "Kakao, kakao." I turned and saw my sister's doll, the one that cries when you took out the pacifier, and its eyes actually blinked at me. I immediately ran to my mum's room and stayed there until 6:45 a.m. Once I reached home from school, I took the doll and threw it in the storeroom, and since then, I had banned all dolls from my room. So, I'm going to share something with you that happened to me as a child. At the time, I was around 10 or 11, and my sister would have been 8 or 9. Long story short, our cousins who we saw every weekend had purchased a life-sized knitted clown from an op shop or thrift store. I know what you are thinking. Why on earth would anyone buy one of those? My thoughts exactly. Anyway, from the moment this clown arrived at their place, weird things started to happen. I'll give you a couple of examples. They would place the clown in their bedroom, for example, and when they woke up, it would be sitting on the couch or in the kitchen, and this went on for some time. One night, a few months after they got the clown, myself and my sister had a sleepover at our cousin's place. By this point, we were all super scared of the clown and didn't want it to be anywhere near us. So for whatever reason, we locked it in the outdoor dog kennels that they had at their place. Sure enough, when we woke up the next morning, she was inside the house, sitting on the couch. Although all our parents were skeptical, our uncle, our cousin's father, decided it would be best to just get rid of the clown for good. He put the clown on the back of his ute, ready to take a load of rubbish to the tip that afternoon. This is the part I really can't explain. Myself, my sister, and our 2 cousins were all out the back of their place riding on the mini 4-wheelers they had, and we stopped to have a break and chat. Then out of literally nowhere, we see the clown running like it's human through the long grass maybe 50 meters away from us. Terrified was an understatement. After 10 seconds, it had disappeared into the long grass. We ran to our parents and tried to explain what we saw, when everyone realized the clown wasn't on the back of our uncle's ute anymore. No one could understand, especially us 4 kids after seeing what we saw. That was the last time we ever saw the clown. We went back to the long grass where we saw it, but nothing was there. We talk about it still to this day, and honestly, still can't believe it. This story sounds like a load of bullshit, I know. But we know what we saw that day, and it's something I'll never get out of my head. I suppose the underlying question is, where did the clown go? And what had caused this to happen? This story happened to me during the lunar 7th month, some 5 years ago. I went over to my then ex's house for dinner at about 6 p.m. After dinner, I was bored enough to actually play with my ex's niece, nephews, and a bunch of other kids who were aged around 5 to 8 years old in one of the bedrooms. I was watching the kids play when suddenly the 5-year-old niece, Crystal, tripped over this English baby doll. One of the ones with blinking eyes, eyelashes, ultra creepy kind. Crystal started crying, and like most Chinese parents who hit whatever hurt their precious little child, I picked up the doll and started spanking its bottom repeatedly. It worked, and her niece started giggling, so I put the doll down on the ground and went to the living room to watch TV. Suddenly, my ex's older sister, Brenda, came out from an adjacent room, asking which kid was the little prankster who tapped her from behind several times. Upon hearing the commotion, I asked her what happened. She explained that she was in the bedroom adjacent to the kids' room where the door was left ajar and the lights were turned off because her fiancé was taking a nap. With nothing to do, she was gazing at the mall opposite from their flat through the window when someone tapped her lower back from behind. The first time she ignored it and brushed it off as one of the kids playing a prank on her. The second time, she turned around and, from the corner of her eye, caught a glimpse of a half-naked kid dashing out from her room. Thinking that the kids were trying to play with her, she looked for them in the other room and was puzzled to find all of them were fully clothed. She was certain of what she saw, but came out of the room puzzled. Who exactly was that little kid who was half naked? Brenda immediately related this incident to her aunt, who then sought the help from a bomo over the phone. This is where the creepy part begins. The bomo told her aunt to enter the children's room and look under the bed. He then insisted that she will find a doll there. Furthermore, he managed to give her one more feature for identification: the color of the doll's eyes, which were blue. I accompanied their aunt to the room and retrieved the doll, and to my astonishment, it was the doll that I spanked earlier. At that time, many questions raced through my head. How did the bomo know that there was a doll under the bed? How did the bomo also know the color of the doll's eyes? Why did the kid not look for me instead, since I was the one who spanked the doll? The bomo immediately instructed their aunt to leave the doll under a tree in the estate's park, and we did. After this incident, we went out for supper and came back to find the doll already taken from the tree. Some more questions popped out. Who in their right frame of mind would dare pick up such dolls during the night of a lunar 7th month? My mum always emphasized never to pick things up during the 7th month because they may be dirty. I kept quiet about the doll spanking incident for fear of getting a scolding from my ex. Of all the questions that went through my head that night, only one was answered by another medium who was a friend of my mum. She claimed that I was sort of untouchable by dirty stuff because I have a pair of really thick eyebrows. Glad I have them. Recently I've been reading some other stories in this sub, and I was reminded of something that happened a while ago. Once a year, my parents go on vacation together somewhere in the US, usually to the Bahamas or to Florida. They leave me in charge of the house with my dog and like for me to check on my nana who lives in our basement. Normal, right? There's another important bit of background information. My dad takes part in this weird golfing competition with his friends where if someone wins a certain amount of holes, they get to take home this creepy doll as a sort of trophy. I don't get why, but I guess it's some running gag. Well, my dad won the competition, and he brought it home before he left. I am not at all scared of dolls. In fact, before he left, I slept with it beside me as a joke. It was basically an old baby doll with a missing eye and a brown dress. I don't know the origin of it, and didn't really bother to ask. November rolls around and my parents leave for their vacation. Everything goes normal for a little while, but then things start to get weird. Because I'm the stereotypical little brother, I put the doll on my sister's bed, who is in university, and took a picture to send to her as a joke. She hates dolls, so I leave the room with the doll still in there and head into my room just to send the photo and move on with my life. A few minutes later, I hear a massive bang. I jump, startled, and go to look out into the hallway. My sister's room has slammed shut. Now, our hallway has no opening windows, and there wasn't any sort of draft. Even if there was, that bang sounded forceful. A little on edge, I open her door and see the doll has fallen face forward, even though I left it sitting upright. I thought it was weird, but brought the doll back into my room and moved on. That night, I'm sleeping normally in my parents' room. I have to sleep in there while my parents are away because I need to keep an eye on my dog, and she refuses to sleep anywhere else. I wake up suddenly in the night, which is odd. I usually sleep all the way through the night. I check the time and see it's around 3 a.m. This immediately freaks me out because I read that it's the witching hour. I glanced over at my dog and she's awake too with her head up. Also strange. I put on my little puppy voice and ask my dog if she needs to pee, but she just stares back at me, then looks to the closet. I look to the closet too and see that it's open, even though I remember shutting it before going to bed. I quickly turn on the lamp and get out of bed to close the door. I don't even bother looking inside. My teenage brain still thinks a ghost is more likely than an intruder, so I get back into bed, scroll on my phone a bit until I fall asleep. I wake up the next morning as usual to feed my dog, but when I go out into the hall, I see my bedroom door is open. I always close my door when I'm not in it. Now, it's still dark out because I have to feed my dog around 6 a.m. or she throws a fit. I look inside my room, turn on the light, and the doll is on the floor. I left it on my bed. I remembered last night and am now feeling paranoid. But again, I just put the doll back on my bed and leave, deciding to just have my door open. After feeding my dog, I went back to bed to sleep a couple of extra hours. That's when the most frightening thing happened. I was woken up by a loud banging sound, loud enough to wake me up, the heaviest sleeper in my family. I quickly got up and ran downstairs, my first thought being maybe my nana had fallen in the basement and was banging for me to help her. But when I got downstairs, I realized the banging was coming from my balcony door. I saw the glass shaking, as if something was hitting it from outside. The banging was so loud, it was shaking the counters. The strangest part is that my dog was just standing in front of the door staring at it. And she's the type of dog who will start barking if a mouse farts. I'm really shaken up at this point. It's completely still outside. No wind at all. I text my parents and tell them what's going on. As soon as I do, the banging stops. They tell me it's probably nothing and not to worry about it. I went downstairs to see my nana, but she had no idea about what happened. She's almost completely deaf, so couldn't hear it. She can't even walk up the stairs, so there was no way of her causing any of this. That was the last weird incident that occurred. The next week, my parents got back. I didn't tell them everything that happened because I didn't want them to think I'm a chicken or something. Needless to say, I moved that doll out of my room until my dad brought it back to his golf team. Nothing strange happened after that. I still have no idea what went on during those couple of days, but it certainly was strange. I sort of wonder the story behind the doll now. This story is about a haunted doll. This particular doll was about the size and weight of a young toddler, and its name was William. My grandmother bought William at a flea market in the mid-1970s. He was dirty, naked and torn, but she saw something about him that she liked, so she bought him anyway. She brought the doll home, cleaned it up, bought toddler-sized clothes for it to wear, named it, and sat it in the rocker in her parlor. Once or twice a year, grandmother would buy William a new outfit to wear and give him another good cleaning, then back to the rocker he would go. William sat there for years. William always scared me when I was a kid. Not only did I have a mannequin phobia to deal with, but William himself was strange looking. He was a very lifelike doll, but on his face he wore an expression that struck me as much too aware and knowing to belong to a child of the age William was supposed to be. Rather than as a toy child, I regarded William as an adult in miniature, and not a particularly nice adult at that. To me, when I was 10, William looked like he knew where I slept and wanted me to know that he knew. If garlic had been a deterrent for dolls instead of vampires, my room would have smelled like pizza. But William never visited me while I was growing up, and he never gave any indication that he was anything other than a big doll with a strange expression. Until my grandmother passed away, and William went to live with my Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Nelson. Lorraine's kids, Michelle and David, were 11 and 9 respectively, just about the age I had been when I first encountered William, and their reaction to him was remarkably similar. He made them nervous. Their mother had propped up William on a wingback chair in the living room, and both kids told me that it was eerie to get up at night to use the bathroom and find William dimly illuminated by the hall light, seeming to watch their comings and goings. From his seat, they said, William could clearly see the doors to both of their rooms, doors they began keeping closed at night, so William couldn't watch them sleeping. Even with the door closed, Michelle remembered recently, it was like I could feel him staring at me, waiting for me to come out. Eventually, William stopped waiting. One night, David got up to a sleeping house for a trip to the bathroom and was surprised to find that William wasn't in his usual spot. David was the younger of the two children, but also the more level-headed one. He decided that his mother must have moved the doll after he had gone to bed, maybe to clean it up or dress it in a new set of clothes, as grandmother had done. He finished in the bathroom and returned to bed, neglecting to shut his door. And as he tucked himself back in, his sleepy eyes widened in alarm. There, back in his usual spot, was William. David leapt from his bed and quickly closed and locked his bedroom door. I didn't know where William had been, he said, but I sure didn't want him in my room. A few nights later, Michelle awoke to take a trip to the bathroom. Casting a wary eye at William, she found him in his usual spot on the chair. On entering the bathroom, she noticed that the toilet paper roll was empty, so she returned to the hall, where a new package was in the linen closet just outside the bathroom. Once back in the hall, she yelped in alarm. William was crumpled on the floor, about 4 feet in front of his chair. To me, she said, it looked like William had climbed down, headed for the open door of my room, but stopped when I came out of the bathroom. Michelle ran back into her room and huddled in her bed. The bathroom would wait until morning. She fell into a fitful sleep and woke early with the sun just beginning to stream in through her window. Her need for the bathroom was urgent now, so she hurriedly unlocked and opened the door, and screamed, rousing the rest of her family from their beds, because when she pulled open her door, William fell into the room. He had apparently been leaning against the door, waiting for it to open. Lorraine and Nelson hadn't been oblivious to the goings-on. They couldn't help but notice that their kids had suddenly started locking their doors at night, but they had attributed that to the kids' increasing desire for privacy and the impending rush of puberty. Neither David nor Michelle had mentioned to them their experiences with William, and even though Lorraine had already begun to feel a certain unease about the doll, she never made the connection until the morning Michelle woke her with a scream. But Lorraine had noticed William's inexplicable refusal to stay put weeks earlier. Nearly every day she would have to put William back in his chair at least once, and often several times. She had no idea how the doll could keep tumbling out of its big chair. she wasn't able to knock the doll down without applying enough force to actually fling him from the chair, so she saw no way for him to simply fall out. But fall out he seemed to do, over and over again. One afternoon, a few days before Michelle's morning scream, Lorraine hadn't been feeling well, and so laid down for a brief afternoon nap. She awakened an hour or so later to find William in bed beside her. She was initially quite spooked, but soon deduced that one of the kids who had come home from school while she slept had placed the doll there as a joke. It was only later that she decided otherwise. The day Michelle had her morning encounter with William, Nelson put the doll in the attic. He believed none of what the kids were saying, but agreed to hide the doll away to mollify them, for they were genuinely afraid. He told the story to my mother a few weeks later, and she told him that she'd like to have the doll if Nelson and Lorraine weren't planning to keep it around. Nelson agreed and went to the attic to get it for her, and was unable to find it. Nelson tore the attic apart, but William was gone. That was nearly 10 years ago, and William hasn't turned up again since.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.